Where do I start? Where do I begin? How do I start?
So thank you for investing the time today. I really appreciate you coming along. And I wanted to share a couple of thoughts about success as a coach. I think one of the things that I became conscious of is there are a number of coaches who've become headline coaches, famous in their field, some big names, and I'm not going to mention any specific names, but I'm guessing you know who I mean. And I think there's probably two groups of those coaches. There's groups of coaches that do deep work with coaches, and they do deep work in their coaching life. And there's probably a group which are more what I see in my Facebook timeline, which is, the six-figure system, the seven-figure system. If you follow my processes, then you can be sitting on a deck chair on the beach without having to work more than an hour a day and make $1 million a year, that kind of thing. And what I became conscious of is that I wonder what's happening in the coaching industry. I wonder if a lot of these coaches, are they actually doing transformational work in the world, or are they actually really making their money from coaching coaches? Because it's a very vibrant market. As coaches, we want to make money, we want to be more successful, and we're also conscious and we're choosing to invest in ourselves or choosing to invest in being a better version of ourselves. And so it's very attractive to go and hire a coach. So I was just wondering, are some of these headline coaches really making all their money from coaches? And then I thought, well, actually, let me make that litmus test myself. Let me test myself. Where am I making my money? Because again, a lot of what I see is I see a lot of promises, and I'm not sure that I see the meat behind that. What's the real truth behind that? Where's the money coming from? What's the breakdown of that? How do coaches find their clients? Coaches who are successful, how do they really find their clients? Who are their clients? And so what I'm sorry if I went on mute there. I'm not quite sure what's happening there. So what I want to talk about today is a couple of areas around success as a coach. Where does my money come from? How do I make that money? What am I actually doing to get that money? Where do I meet those kinds of people? But before I want to dive into that, before I dive into the numbers, I wanted to set some context. And I've recently shared this, and I want to share it again because it's something I'm very passionate about. For me, success as a coach, it breaks down into what I'm calling the 5 C's. I think I started off with 3, and over time I've added in a couple of others. That for me, the 5 C's in coaching start out with clarity. And the reason why I bring clarity into this, some of you will have heard the last wisdom call I did, or a recent call that I was on, where I did some live coaching. And Nicola joined the call, and she said, I'm really passionate about this concept of an eco-village, and talking about, a very positive, eco-friendly environment and a community. And yet she was finding that a real challenge. And I used a very simple tool with her about how she used her energy and how she focused her energy. And what came up, in fact, Nicola's just joining us now. And what came up in that is that her vision, the thing that she thought she wanted to do, wasn't a 10 for her. It wasn't a 10 out of 10 in terms of how it created energy for her and the positive level of energy it created for her. And so for me, clarity is, first of all, is this the thing that you really, really want? Because if it isn't, it's hard work. Because it's hard work even if it is a thing you really, really want. And if it's not the thing you really, really want, then that work's going to feel pretty tough. Are you entirely clear that this is the work that you want to do? Are you clear on how you want to be a coach? It's not necessarily. I'm sorry that for some reason it keeps muting me. Is this the thing you really want? Are you clear on how you want to coach? Are you clear on the kind of people you want to hang around with? Are you clear on the kind of people that inspire you? I'm not a big fan of. Are you? Am I still? Are you still not hearing me? I'm just doing a quick check. Oh, Olivia can hear me. Cool, thank you. I just got a message there saying you couldn't hear me. So first of all, there's that piece on clarity, which is, I think, the simple test for me is: do you wake up in the morning thinking, how can I be a better coach today? Who can I serve today? How can I really make this successful for me? I think there's a thing about courage as well. So to me, the second C is courage. Do you have the courage to ask the questions that no one else is prepared to ask? Are you prepared to be a mirror to someone where they've never looked into before? And if I share an example of that, I recently coached somebody who I connected with on LinkedIn, and he asked me if I could help him with his web design business. And I asked him a very simple question. I asked him, what is it that you really, really do? And he gave me a sort of 3-4 minute description of what he did. And the truth was, it was boring. The truth was, it just didn't engage me. And so I let him finish, and I said, well, you kind of lost me at the beginning. I started to lose interest as soon as you told me what you did. I got a bit of interest back again, but then I got bored. He couldn't believe that's what I said to him. And yet it was so powerful for him. In the months before we had that very first conversation, he was losing £1,000 to £2,000 a month, doing a lot of proposals and getting no business. That was about 6 or 7 weeks ago. In the 6 or 7 weeks since we had that call, he has signed over £50,000 worth of clients, simply because he got clear on who he was and what he was doing for his clients. No one else had ever given him that feedback, that actually his pitch before was just really disengaging and boring. It wasn't differentiated, and it just didn't excite. And it was a huge impact for him getting to that different place. So have the courage to ask powerful and fearless questions. I think something that is particularly relevant to what I'm going to share with you around where my revenues come from is the third C, which is consistency. A lot of people I work with, whether they're coaches or in business, they try something. I tried this, I gave it a month, didn't really work very well, I wasn't really sure what I was doing, and now I'm going to try this other thing. The one thing I know from experience is that is the destiny to having no clients. That's the route to not being where you need to be. I see Rich Waterman's smiley face on the call here. Rich, I think it's pretty well known that Rich and I worked together for 6 months. And for 5.5 months, he didn't enroll any clients. He didn't make any money. But what I loved about Rich is he kept coming back week after week. He kept going at it. And then he made that breakthrough. And I know that in the time since then, that Rich has had some success, and he's had some times when it hasn't worked out so well. And from our conversations, what I do know, and I hope that Rich doesn't mind me sharing this, and I'm sure he'll back it up in conversation, is when he's been distracted by, oh, that looks like a good idea, and he goes off to do something, that's been the time when it hasn't worked out. When he's been consistent and showed up consistently serving the kinds of people that he loves to work with, that's when he's started getting clients again. That's when he started to enroll. That's when he started making money again. Consistency is so important. The fourth C for me is, I call it company. Coaching, for many people, is a lifestyle choice. We do it because we can shape what we do around our agenda, around our time, around our travel plans, around where we are in the world, about the number of hours we have available in the day. But it's also still a business. And I think the company, to me, has 2 dimensions to it. One is, if we don't treat our coaching business as a business, then it's likely to have challenges. If it's a hobby, then that's okay. But hobbies are hard to make money out of. If you treat it as a business, then you show up with business disciplines. You do your accounting, you do your tracking, you do the things that real businesses do. But here's the other thing about business, and I've been in a number of businesses, I've been in corporate life, I've been in a number of small businesses. Here's the thing about business that a lot of coaches don't have, and it literally is company. As coaches, we often work alone. I'm not going to say it's a lonely business because personally I work alone, and yet I'm not lonely at all. I'm speaking to people all the time. And yet it's a business where we are alone. And it's often difficult to find someone to bounce off, someone to check in with, someone just to have a conversation with about the next idea you want to work on. And so company, to me, comes in two parts. It's treat it like a business and find a group, a friend, another coach, a masterminding group, a coaching group, whatever it is that works for you. Find a way where you're not doing it on your own. Sometimes you come up with what seems like the most amazing idea when you're out on your bike ride or in the shower or whatever it is. And when you bounce it off somebody else and they start to challenge you, you realize actually it's just not going to work out. And sometimes you come up with that idea and they go, absolutely, that's what you should do. And so it helps energize you. It adds even more energy into your idea. And so I think company is something that's very important. The final piece, the final C for me of the 5 C's, is conversations. Personally, and this is my own personal experience, and it'll be, when I go into the numbers, you'll see what this means. I think coaching is such a personal business, it's such a personal process, that conversations are how you create a powerful personal experience of you. And when you can create a powerful personal experience of you, it makes the process of enrolling a client so much more powerful, so much more possible. Because in conversation, you can create an experience of coaching with you. In conversation, you can create transformation. And to me, that's where coaching begins. That's the seed of coaching. So I'm going to encourage you when I'm talking about how my business works to think about the 5 C's: clarity, courage, consistency, company, and conversations. Where are you on those 5 scales? In the Coaching Unlimited group, you've probably seen me post recently. I've posted probably 8, 10, 12 questions that relate to each of these categories, each of the 5 C's. All right, where are you with these things? If you look at courage, for example, are you creating conversations? Are you asking and inviting people? Are you enrolling people? Do you have the courage to say your fee out loud? There's a whole bunch of different areas where courage will show up. So think about the 5 C's. Think about where you are when I share what I'm going to share with you very shortly. One thing I am going to share with you around the 5 C's, and Natasha, I only think all of my 5 can be improved. One of the things I want to share with you about my passion at the moment is I'm putting together a small group, a very intimate group of coaches, where we're going to commit with each other to dive deep in the 5 C's for 12 months. So whatever mechanism you choose to do it, find a mechanism that's powerful, whether it's a co-coach, whether it's a group, whether it's a mastermind, whether it's your own personal coach you want to hire. Find a way to check in on these 5 things. For me, my passion is creating a small group where we will be, I talk about company, we're going to be a virtual board of directors for each other as we dive deep on the 5 C's, as we grow our businesses. For me, I want to double my coaching business in size in the next 12 months. But there's some people coming into that group, they want to grow from being 20,000 a year to 120,000 a year. That's the kind of ambition that they have. It's an ambition which is not just about a 10% growth. It's how do I double my business? How do I create a new business? How do I move from being a therapist to being a powerful coach and create even greater revenues? How do I create more impact and more transformation? So that's what I'm passionate about, and that's what I'm excited about in the next 12 months. And that's how I'm going to hold myself and that group to a higher standard is we get together and we connect and we follow through and we're consistent and we're courageous. So that's about success as a coach. Let me dive into the meat of it, when I think a lot of you have come on because you want to hear how these numbers break down. Now, when I announced this call and I announced this idea, I wanted to talk about the revenue I'd created in the last 24 months. And I put a nice round number on the invite, which was $500,000. And today I actually sat down, went through my accounts to work out the exact breakdown of my revenue. And my shall I say, my headline number I was pretty excited about because I'd guessed it was around about $500,000. And actually, when I added it all up, it was $504,000. And I thought that was a pretty good guess. And I've broken it down into 3 areas. It's who is actually paying me that money. Now, some of my clients are on this call, so it's not names, obviously, it's types of individuals. And so by area, I'm going to break down where that revenue came from. So about $500,000, and I wouldn't say it's flowed evenly over the last 24 months. What I find in my most successful months, I made $80,000, and there have been other months where it's been $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. There are no months when it's zero. But what I want to do say it's pretty lumpy. I tend to have a month or two where I've made $40,000 to $80,000, and then for the next few months, it might be for 2 or 3 months, 4 months, it might be fairly modest level, and then I'll jump up and have another month where it's $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. So in terms of breakdown, the types of people where I'm making my money. So the biggest chunk are what I call executive coaching. And that's about 40% of my total revenue. Now, in that 40%, probably about a third of that, possibly even half of that, comes from one company. And that company, I'm also a non-executive director. And so it's the nearest thing I have to what I call a cash project. And the work that I do there is advisory, it's consultancy, and it's coaching of the senior team. So there's a chunk of that is from a single client, and that's quite a significant chunk. Outside of that, I also have my highest paying executive client who paid me $30,000 for 6 months of coaching, and he works for a global brand name. And I also have clients within that who work at places like Barclays Bank, Deloitte Consulting, Wipro Technologies. So these are corporate organizations. But I want to make a key point here, a key differentiator about that. Whilst they're from global brand names or large organizations, each one of them I enrolled because of a personal connection. I don't go to companies like a Barclays or a Deloitte or an Ernst & Young and say, I would like to coach your organization. I tend to get connected to individuals, or I get referred to individuals, and we get into a conversation, and they say to me, I'd really like you to be my coach. And then we work together on how I can coach them, and then they find a way for their organization to pay me. And that's a distinction I want to make here. I don't do corporate coaching, even though I do get paid by corporates. And I hope you get that difference there. The second most significant group that I realize my revenue comes from is coaches. So if 40% comes from executives, 30% comes from coaches, people who are growing their coaching businesses. And I have included everybody who comes to my events, which is about a third of that revenue comes from the live events I put on. So I've said that everybody comes to my events. I've included in that category, even though about 25% of them aren't coaches. I've put them into that, lumped them into that category. So coaches form that. And of that revenue, of that 30% of my total revenue, whilst it's from coaches, probably about a third is from one-on-one coaching, about a third is from group that I run, and about a third is from my live events. The next significant group is 20% of my revenue. So that's about $100,000 over the last 2 years, is from one-on-one coaching of entrepreneurs. So these are individuals who own a business that they've created. Some of them, it's a business where they are the only person in the business. So one of my clients is a consultant, and she runs a consultancy, and she owns it. She's the only person in it, and she's a client. I have another, in fact, a number of other entrepreneurs where I've come back again, I believe. So the entrepreneurs are people that own their own businesses, but they tend to be fairly small businesses. So up to about 35, 40 employees. So from 0 up to about 35, 40 employees is what I would call an entrepreneur. And then after that, so there's the 3 big chunks of where my coaching revenue comes from: executive coaching, coaches, and entrepreneurs. I then have a number of small groups, and I've separated them out because this is where I have more than one person in a sector, and so there's multiple people in these sectors. But I thought it was worth breaking out because I just thought it was quite interesting. There's personal coaching, where I'm providing one-on-one coaching to somebody, and it's outside of any business aspect. It's about them growing. It's about them facing some challenges. It's about them creating something in the world. I also have coached a number of people who want to be better speakers, and that might include a little bit of coaching, but it's mostly... Ben is muting me. You can still hear me. All right, okay. So I've coached a number of speakers. I also have coached a number of lawyers. And for some reason, and I guess it's just what's shown up for me, or maybe it's proximity, I've coached a number of therapists. So that's kind of the breakdown of who I coach. I think in terms of total revenue, and this is a relatively simple picture, if I was to break down the revenue by large chunk, I'm just trying to work in the exact numbers here because I forgot to write the numbers down. About 45% comes from coaching. So that's one-on-one coaching. About 40% comes from business. And most of that comes from one business, where, as I say, I do advisory work with them, but I also separately have a separate coaching contract with the chief executive, who is in my entrepreneur category. And that's that totals up about 40%. And then the final piece is about 35% is working with coaches. And about a third of that, as I say, is from my live events. So that's the what in terms of breakdown. And I think the final third that I want to share with you is how does this break down? And I think this is probably the most important, because you're probably thinking, well, if that's who you coach, how did you meet with these people? How did you connect with these people? And so I broke it down into the relationships. And this is revenue rather than numbers of actual relationships. This is actual by revenue. And so again, it's skewed because bear in mind that about 35, 40% of my revenue comes from one business, albeit some of that's coaching and some of that's advisory work. So my biggest single source of revenue is what I call professional, which is about 45%. So what I mean by professional is, for those of you who know me, I've been around for a while. I've got a few gray hairs. And so before I was a coach, I worked in business, in industry, and also in consulting. And so professional to me means people who I have connected with in my professional life. People that I've worked with, some of these people I've worked with maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago. I talked about working as an advisor to this one business. That was somebody, and also coaching the chief executive, that was somebody that I first met 14 years ago, where he was a client of mine when I was a director of a blue chip organization. So professional is where there's been a long-standing relationship that's been fostered and maintained over the years. Now, some of those professional relationships are quite funny. A few years ago, when I was working within an organization, I was helping them recruit somebody. There was somebody I interviewed for 1 hour, and I rejected them. 4 years later, this summer, they contacted me on LinkedIn and said that they were looking for a coach. They'd been doing some research, and they decided that I was their ideal coach. Now, that is probably going to be one of the most oddest connections I've ever made in business. Someone I met for 1 hour and rejected them came back to me 4 years later and said they thought I'd be a great coach for them. So I've included that in the professional box, and I just thought that was really a curious connection. So I think the lesson from that is you never know where your next client might come from. If you show up powerfully as a coach, you never know where your next client might come from. So my next category of source of clients, about 25%, is events. Now, for me, this is a real mix, because this is a mix of attending other people's events, and I'm simply in the audience, and it's a great place to network. It is certainly in the past, much less so nowadays, I've worked with Tony Robbins. And so I've either been attending an event, I've been in the leadership role of that event, or I've been a trainer at that event and part of that community. And people have come to me because of that. And we've explored a conversation for me to coach them. Now, some of those I'd call also a referral, because there are people that I've met at events, and then they've referred me to someone else who's then reached out to me and said, I'd like to work with you. And so events have been a very important source. So if I was to look at actually numbers of relationships that I have, events have been a very important source for me for creating clients. And it's not necessarily when I've been a leader at an event. It's very much where I've been in the audience or simply participating has been just as powerful for me as it has been if I'm on stage or in a leadership role. The next biggest category for me is, at 15%, is referral. So this is where I've worked with somebody, I've spoken at an event, I've been in an event, I have, from my professional network, I have been referred on, and someone said, if you want to work on that, the person you need to speak to is David. And so that's about 15% of the work that I do. I think one that surprised me, and it might surprise you because you know that I'm very active on Facebook, I've become increasingly active on LinkedIn, and that's starting to work for me in terms of getting business. In terms of my coaching revenue, 10% of my coaching revenue has come from social media. And of that, a significant chunk of that 10% is actually live events and programs rather than one-on-one coaching. So for me, social media is something I really enjoy. Many of you are on this call today because of social media. And yet in terms of creating clients, for me, it's primarily been for events, for group programs, and rarely it's created one-on-one clients. It has created one or two, but it's the exception rather than the rule. So social media, it's important. It's something which I enjoy. But in terms of overall business creation, it's not as powerful as I would have guessed, especially since I have a pretty strong presence on social media. Maybe not as strong as some, but Coaching Unlimited's been a strong group. LinkedIn is starting to create some activity. but something to think about. And certainly for me, I'm going to look at that and explore, is the amount of time I spend on social media, is it actually creating the right level of return, given it's only creating about 10% of my revenue? And the final category I've got here, at about 5 or 6% of my revenue, has come through what I call interviews. Now, you could argue this is another version of social media, but this is where I've been interviewed by somebody else. So Jacob Sokol, Mark Mawhinney, Rich Litvin. I've been interviewed by them, and that's been published in various forms. And that's created direct revenue, where someone said, I saw your interview, I'd love to have a conversation with you, and that's created a client or a potential client. So that's been something that relatively low investment from my perspective. It's a short amount of time being interviewed, and yet it's created, about 5% of that revenue, which is a significant chunk of revenue. So if I was to explore again the who, the what, and the where, that's how it's broken down. I think I'm excited by, when I look at the numbers, I'm kind of excited by, I think, a strong presence of personal and executive and entrepreneurial coaching. I was getting a drink here. Excuse me 1 second. And I think for me, looking at the numbers, it's been a real powerful reminder in a couple of areas. Because if I look at how my numbers break down, if I look at my professional network, events, and referral, that's about 85% of my revenue comes from that. What that really means to me is create an impact when you have conversations. Be consistent. Because if you have a network and you are not consistent maintaining your network, then it loses its value. There's a friend of mine who's also been a client. I actually work with his son. We were in the same company together 10 or 12 years ago, and he earns about £1 million a year, about $1.5 million a year, providing consulting services. And he sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work, because most of it is where he's providing other people. What's remarkable about that is he's creating that revenue because he consistently and relentlessly has maintained his professional network from the last 20 years. So the core message for me, in my experience, is create connections, create conversations, ask people for referrals, create a reason for them to give you a referral. When you get a referral, make sure you follow up. Ensure that you continue to have conversations. And I think that's what creates a sustainable coaching business. Social media has been great for me. I've really enjoyed it. But as I say to you today, it would seem that only about 10% of my revenue comes from that. And I think, to me, that's a big lesson. There are some where that is a very different number, and I understand that. And I suspect they spend an inordinate amount of time following a social media as a strategy. So that was my experience. The one thing I would like to share with you. Okay, so Keshav has asked a question about how long have I been coaching for professionally. So I want to actually, it's a great question, because in my business, I have been in my business for 10 and a half years. When I set out in this business, I wanted to be a coach and a consultant. I saw consultancy as kind of a cash generator, and I saw coaching as my passion. What happened was I got sucked back into the world of consultancy, and I left little time for coaching. But there was also a harsher truth in that, which is in coaching, I found it really hard to sell. So 3 years ago, I abandoned consultancy, even though I was earning significant revenue, $500,000 a year or more. in consultancy, I stopped. And I thought, I really, really want to do coaching because that's what I want to do. I'm going to drop consultancy completely and just do coaching. I invested a ton of money and 12 months of my time learning different strategies for working as a coach and selling and enrolling. What I discovered for me is the building the funnel, the building the list, the social media route didn't really work. I think I'm pretty good at it. I think I'm pretty good at some of the strategies. I got very good at doing Facebook stuff. But what I learned was you need a really big list to start making any impact in terms of revenue. What I also discovered was that a deep personal transformational coaching relationship is hard to create from a conversation on LinkedIn. There are many steps in the funnel before that. And that's something I just wasn't committed to make happen. It was when I started doing one-on-one conversations that I started to make money as a coach. And so this 24-month period I'm talking about really was when I started doing one-on-one conversations to create revenue. So in the 12 months before this period, my income was about $15,000, $20,000. And in the last 24 months, it's been $504,000. So a massive shift in terms of the level of impact, which in turn was the level of ability to enroll clients. And so it may be simply for me, I found my sweet spot, and that's what I'm sharing. I'm sharing what I discovered worked for me. It may be completely different for you. But what I wanted to do was share some context on the experience that I had that might resonate with you or might give you some ideas. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce someone on this call. Hopefully they're still here. Because what I want to share with you is that creating clients can often come from the simplest ideas. And it's about having clarity in what the idea is. It's having the courage to take action. It's about using that to create conversations. And so in a moment, I'm going to introduce Brittany, who's recently started something that may be a great source of clients for her. And certainly it's a great way for her to make a simple impact in the world. Just before I do that, I just want to, David Block's sort of a question. He said, I'm throwing out lots of percentages. They add up for more than 100%. I'm sorry if I'm not entirely clear, but I will be publishing these exact numbers in Coaching Unlimited, and I can assure you they add up to 100% because Excel did the numbers for me. So if I'm not sharing clearly enough, then the actual data, I'll put that on Facebook just to clarify what I've been sharing here today. So thanks for that, David. So what I want to do now is I'm going to, hopefully Brittany's still there and we're still connected. Hi, Brittany.
Hi, David. Hi, everyone.
So I would like to, well, first of all, actually, Brittany, thank you for joining us. I know it's morning for you over in the US. Really appreciate you joining and spending some time with us today, and I hope that you've enjoyed that so far. And when you and I were talking recently, you were sharing how you'd had an idea some time ago about forming a business club, a business mentoring club. And what I loved was that having had that idea, that you then put it into action, and it very quickly created some traction for you. So I would love it if you could spend 5 minutes or so sharing what you did with that, and then we'll see if anybody's got any questions from the group about what I've been sharing with you, or what you've got to share, if that's okay.
Sure. So I would say the springtime, I had got an idea to start a group. And one thing that's always intrigued me is small business or solopreneurs, people who run their own business and have less than 5 employees or so. And it's probably intrigued me because that's how I identify myself. I am my one-man show, and have learned a tremendous amount from others, from reading and from creating my own version of different mastermind groups and just seeking out mentors. And so I had seen a need for this in the community and through the clients that I had already brought in to my practice. For those of you who don't know, I'm a therapist by training and have been working on transitioning my business into a full-time coaching business for about a year. And I thought I needed this entire business plan to really start this group. I knew I wanted to do something around this topic, but really struggled to put an idea together beyond that. And it was easy to put it on the back burner because, well, my resistance would get the best of me. So in September, I went to Rich Litvin's intensive in Santa Monica and really got re-energized around this idea, and it had popped up in several different ways immediately before and after the intensive, mostly in the form of other therapists reaching out to me, asking for help on how to create a successful and sustainable therapy practice. So I just saw this need arising and the universe bringing it to me. And I just thought, well, what the heck, let's just go for it. And I knew people already within my realm that I'm already connected to that qualified as these solopreneurs or small business owners. And so I just started talking with them individually, just picking up the phone and asking them what they need, what could really serve them. And so that really started a great conversation. I was running these really like mini focus groups, trying to find out where people felt stuck and what they thought would make the greatest difference in their business. And what I found was there was a pattern. And it really spoke to one of your 5 C's, David, which was, oh, where did you talk about it? You spoke about isolation. Oh, there.
Oh, company.
Yeah. And a lot of people identified their experience as being their own and feeling like a lot of the things they were struggling with were just them. And they didn't have their own community to kind of work through this and share this. And so one of the biggest benefits I've had from creating my own mentorships and masterminds was company and understanding that my experience wasn't just my own and that there was so much that could be gleaned from hearing other people's process of the exact same thing. And different, how much perspective can really enhance your business. So I went into it with this being really the goal of, we're going to address specific issues, but within that, I want to create a community in which the members serve each other. Because I feel like with so much, and you mentioned this, with all these online programs, with so much content being thrown at us constantly, that we just think the answer to all of our problems is one 5-step course away from having some secret answer that we don't know. That's not it. We have all the information that we need to create what we want to create. But I found that community and company can really be the key piece to help get us there. And so selfishly, I also wanted to create this group for myself because I wanted some company and I wanted to be inspired and I wanted to bring people in who were taking action and doing inspiring things in the world, having impact. So I sought that out as my criteria. I had these conversations. I figured out what would be most useful to people who identified themselves in this way, and that was basically it. And I didn't write out my curriculum or what I was even going to say until the night before the first session. Now, I don't know if that's procrastination or lack of preparedness or whatnot, but I wanted to really be present with everyone and serve them in a way that was relevant for them right then and there. And that has really, really gone well. And I've been able to bring people in who I've been connected with in some way. Each week I have new inquiries. I've managed to transition one client from the group to a one-on-one client. And it really, I'm already considering how I'm going to make a second group just because of the inquiries I'm getting. So what I've also been finding, I actually had my group call this morning just before this one, and what I am pleasantly finding is I'm speaking less and less on the call. And the idea behind it, which was to create community in which we can foster each other's growth, that's already happening, and it's week 4. And I'm just really excited by it. I get incredibly energized. I get inspired, and I have feedback that that's also happening for other people. So it's serving us mutually, and it's creating more and more connections, and it creates content for me to also share with potential people who want to be involved as well.
Brittany, I really appreciate you sharing all of that. And I really wanted to bring it to this group because for a number of reasons. First of all, you've made it successful. And I think for those of us listening to you, I think one of the reasons that's very obvious why you've made it successful is that you're passionate and you're energized. And I love that. You've got that energy in it. And I also think that, there's a nice distinction you make, and Zara brought this out as well, which is you've created a group that you'd want to be part of. And I think, there's different variations on that comment, which is we teach what we most need to learn. When we're coaching, it's like the mirror. Whatever it is, you've brought something out of yourself that other people felt resonated for them and you wanted to connect with. And I think that's incredibly powerful. I also like the fact that, and I think that hopefully everybody picked up on this, that you filled this group by creating conversations. You didn't just go to social media and say, hey, here's a group. You went out there and contacted people and said, would you like to be part of this? Would this resonate with you? This is what's happening. There was something that you didn't quite mention, I think, which is you asked people for commitment. Can you comment on how that works?
Sure. So this was actually something that had been a struggle for me, and David, we've talked about this at length, and I really became awake, I think, and started paying attention to the issue in September. That I was terrified to ask for a commitment beyond like a month. A month was the greatest commitment I had gotten from people, a monthly rate, and I knew that was stopping me from giving and serving more fully, because I always had a part of my mind on client creation past that month. And so I really wanted to move out of that because I could serve people better and people would get more from their investment, basically, if they committed as well. So I asked for a 6-month commitment. I'm pregnant, so I'm not sure what my life is going to look like in 6 months. So that was about as much as I could commit. And of course I was nervous about it, but I explained to everyone who was interested what I understood about commitment and through commitments I have made through my own investment in coaching. But how, I guess, my personal experience as a coach in knowing that I could give so much more through committing so much more deeply. And I kind of pulled out in them that they're all business owners. You've committed to this business. Are you committed to it for longer than a month? And they'll laugh out loud. Well, of course I am. I've been in this for, X amount of years. Well, then commit to making your business and yourself better for more than a month.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's to me, that speaks to many things, because first of all, it's a big step. I think you've managed to probably mute that, a bit of echo. You asked for commitment, and that takes some courage. Again, talk about the 5 C's. Courage. Part of courage is actually making that shift, asking someone to commit, and it can be a little bit nervy when you first do that. And you mentioned you work with a therapist, and I work with a number of therapists, and it's the mindset of people pay for a session, and they come for a session, they come for another session, whereas coaching might be a 6 or a 12-month journey that you're on together. It's quite a different mindset. So I think commitment is a very powerful piece. I think the other thing is of the 5 C's I certainly bring up is clarity. You are clear in what you wanted to do, and then you took action. I think that was the last point I probably want to draw out from what you said is you actually took action. It was something you had in your mind 4 or 5 months. It was something that you had an itch to scratch, a passion that you wanted to fulfill, and it was a tipping point. You were energized to a tipping point. Once you hit that tipping point, you then took action. And what I love about your action is the consistency, because you started making calls and you started getting people engaged. What I've noticed with some coaches, in fact, not just coaches, some business people, is they'll make the first call and they'll get a yes and I've done what I need to do. And then they'll sit back. Or they'll get their first no and they'll go, it's not working. What actually has to happen is I make that first call and then the next call and the next call and then the next call. I don't think you mentioned numbers, but certainly I remember from when we were talking, you'd already enrolled 6 or 7 people before the group had started. And as you say, you're now getting to a number where you're probably going to have to start a second group to pick up the numbers that you're enrolling, which is an amazing place to be. Many coaches never get to that place. And so I love the simplicity of the idea, the courage and commitment and clarity you've put into that and the passion you put into that. And actually now you're following it through. You're letting it happen. And also you're letting the group create the agenda and create the conversation and you're facilitating that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Mm-hmm. Is there any final comment you'd like to make about that?
Yes, just one thing I've seen the people in the group kind of struggle with and work through that was the initial thing holding me back was this idea of a business plan. And so I'd guess my final words will be a business plan is BS. There are plenty of places where it's actually helpful, but if you're using it as a way to stop yourself from taking physical action, don't let it. You don't need it. You already know, you've already created the space in your head or you're working on creating the space for what you want to bring to life. And a piece of paper isn't something you need to do that.
Thank you. That's a great distinction. Thanks, Brittany. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. We've got a few minutes left. I appreciate if I open the call to everybody, there might be a lot of background noise, but I'm happy to take a couple of questions. So if you've got access to a computer and you've got a question you'd like to ask or a clarification you would like, you can type it into the little icon box at the right-hand side, and I'd love to take a question if you've got one. I appreciate a number of you are on the phone, so I'm just going to very briefly take everybody off mute and shout out if you've got a question. So would anyone like to ask a question? So I'm going to I've got a question coming over from Rich. I've got 2 questions. Hang on. Oh, the thing has gone shooting up. What will I do differently based on these insights? I think now that I've done an analysis of where my revenue breaks down, I'm going to seriously consider how I use social networking, because in terms of hours consumed, it's disproportionate to revenue created. So the thing that has become most important for me, and it relates to Bob's question as well, which is networking. There's no doubt that most of my revenue, and especially one-on-one clients and referrals to one-on-one clients, have been created at flesh events, places where I'm either at an event, I'm speaking at an event, I'm a guest at someone else's event, I'm simply participating in someone else's event, or creating my own events. It's where I'm in the room with people physically. I think that's what's created more revenue for me than anything else. So it's getting to know people as people and allowing or creating a powerful personal experience. So I think, Bob, in your point, I think whether I go to networking groups or not, I don't know. they'll certainly be seeking to focus more on creating powerful personal connections. Flash events. So I don't think we've got any more questions. So just as a quick summary of our call, think about the 5 C's for you. Are you clear on what it is you really, really want? Are you clear that coaching's for you? Coaching, building a coaching business is hard. It's not easy. It's an easy choice because it's relatively easy to get into. But to build a sustainable revenue is not easy. I mean, I've come on this call and I've talked about creating $500,000 in 24 months. That sounds fantastic. And in many ways it is. And I can tell you from this side of the call, I know it's hard to create sustainable revenue. I still have to work every day to do that. Courage. If you're going to be a coach, be a fearless coach. Be a powerful coach. Be a courageous coach. That's what I invite you to do. Don't be a coach because it's nice. Be a coach because it creates powerful transformational impact in the world. That's what you're capable of. Be consistent. You know, if you've got an idea, like Brittany's idea with the business mentoring, and you want to try it out, don't try it for a month. Try it for 6 months, and then decide if it works for you. Serve every day, as Brittany says, serve every day. Company. Find a way to create company for you. Find a way to create a group. You know, I mentioned to you, I'm putting a group together for the next 12 months. I'm deeply passionate about that. If anything on this call resonates with you and you'd love to talk about that, I'd love to have a conversation with you. And if it's not for you, that's cool too. Hire a coach. Find another group. Get into a mastermind. Put something together yourself. Don't go it alone. Create somewhere where you can sit and create space, test your ideas out, bounce it off other people. And finally, and I think this is the most important, I think the number one foundation stone of building a powerful and sustainable coaching business is having conversations. The more conversations you can have, I think the more potential there is for you to generate revenue. So I really appreciate you coming today. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. I will be posting the call and a PDF of some of the data. I appreciate I shout out lots of numbers there, and perhaps it didn't all quite add up. But I want to, revisit the who, the how, and the what, and how that breaks down for me. And I'll be putting that into Coaching Unlimited. And if you want any more information on this, or you'd like to have a conversation as to how this works for you or how your coaching business is developing, then please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. It's been great speaking with you today. Create an amazing day. If it's your morning, create an amazing day. If it's your evening, then create an amazing tomorrow. And I look forward to speaking with you again next time. Thanks again. Bye for now, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, Dave.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Dennis.